The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. Bringing you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
Can the Aggies finally make history and win in Death Valley?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies.
It's that time of the week, DJ. It's time for bold predictions. It's time for X Factors. It's time for Matt and DJ's school for kids who can't gamble good. Because we have sucked in the prop bet department so far this year, but that's okay. We're going to rectify that this week. Let's start with bold predictions, though, DJ. This is a huge game for Texas A&M. Obviously, they're 7-0 for the first time since 1994. Just so happens that they are going into Death Valley, where they have not won since 1994. I believe that was an 18-13 win by the Aggies under R.C. Slocum. So, you know, a lot of people, including yourself. How old are you, DJ?
22.
22. So you were, what, 2 years old when this happened? When the Aggies last beat?
I wasn't even thought of for another 10 years. Yeah.
You were 10 years removed. That's
yeah.
Math Live on air. Yeah, so you weren't even alive the last time the Aggies won in Death Valley.
Not even thought of.
You were a sparkle in your parents' eyes.
Yep.
That means something. 30 years, 31 years since the Aggies have won in Death Valley. So my first bold prediction, DJ, the Aggies make history and they win in Death Valley.
I like that. You know, there's just some games that you get a gut feeling about, and it's like the Aggies are going to win that one. And, you know, looking at the schedule going into the year, that was one that I had kind of that feeling about even before all the success. So I'd be really excited to see if they can go in there and do it. My first bold prediction for A&M is just going to kind of piggyback on that. I think the Aggies are going to go in there and win. I think they're going to make history in that front. But I think they're going to do it on the back of the best rushing performance they have of the year.
Okay. I like that. So that would entail what exactly? Because Texas A&M won last week against Arkansas, and they had over 200 yards rushing. Let's see if I can pull up. Okay, so let's go through their performances rushing this season real quick and see where that could stack up. Because this is interesting, because I really like this one. They had over 200 against Arkansas. Against UTSA in the season opener, they had 108, so not great. Against Utah State, they had 235. So your number's getting up there, DJ. Against Mississippi State, they had 299. Against Florida, 183. So the Aggies have to get 300 yards rushing in this game. That's what you're predicting?
Yeah, I think they'll do it. I think we're going to see it. Ruben O'Rourke, he seems to be kind of stepping into that workhorse role. I think that you're going to see, E.J. Smith getting in there. Every game that he's been playing in since Moss got down, he's been getting better and better. And then I think Jamarian Morrow is going to pick up the slack for the rest of the yardage there. And I actually don't think that Marcel Reed's going to be as much of a factor in the run game. I think LSU watched him, gash him last year. So I think they're going to be really locked in on him, and they're not going to let him make as much of an impact with his legs.
I really like this because this is the definition of bold predictions. This is a good one because I think you could be right, and it's going to shock a lot of people. I think Jamarian Morrow is a dude, and I think he's gonna have a big game here. And I think that they need to to run the football effectively in this game to win as well, because it's going to be a very hostile environment, and that's a good way to take the crowd out of the game. All right, my next bold prediction, DJ. I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball for the Aggies, and I am going to predict that. Let me make sure. Hold on. Let me make sure that I'm not wrong about this before I actually make the prediction. I'm just going to double check the stat real quick. Okay, that's what I thought. Des Ricks gets his first interception of the year and his second interception of the year. He picks off Garrett Nussmeier twice and changes the game for this Aggie defense.
I like that one. Nussmeier threw 3 picks, I think, last year against the Aggies in Kyle Field. So I personally thought that was, an aspect of Kyle Field. You have the 12th man, night game, everything's loud and rowdy. I thought it was a product of that and just kind of being flustered with everything. Pass rush was showing some sort of life, which didn't really happen too often last year. But I really think that this A&M defense is in a better spot than it was last year, especially with the pass rush. And if the pass rush starts getting home, I wouldn't be surprised seeing Nussmeier start, kind of rushing those throws that he'd usually a little bit more time. And I like that. I like that prediction a lot.
All right, give me your next one, DJ.
I think it's going to be pretty similar to last season's game against the Aggies. I think Nussmeier and the LSU offense is just going to gash this secondary. Last year they put up 400 passing yards. I think they'll get near that again. I don't think it'll be enough, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a day.
Okay, I like that. Last year's game was one of the more exciting games that we've had in that series, because Texas A&M had that big comeback, and it's this game always seems to get a little weird. So I think one of the things that Texas A&M hasn't really done this year outside of Notre Dame really is have a big comeback. So if LSU kind of jumps out early, I can see A&M fighting their way back in this game, because I think Mike Elko has these kids believing. And I like that. I like that one a lot.
The NFL season is rolling along, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for this weekend with can't-miss offers. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however I want to bet in the moment. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
BYU is Iowa State bound, and the Cougars are looking to go 8-0.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars.
BYU, ranked 11th in the country, is knocking on the door of the top 10. They're also 7-0, one of just 6 teams across this great land that are undefeated at this point in the season. They are carrying a lot of weight on their shoulders because they are the favorite in the Big 12 for the time being by virtue of their undefeated start. Yes, I know that Cincinnati is also undefeated in Big 12 play, but they have a loss on the record to Nebraska. So you look at it, BYU is going for a major opportunity with the chance to move inside the top 10 and really assert themselves as a dominant force here in the Big 12, but standing in their way, the Iowa State Cyclones. Now, when the schedule came out, you guys, those who are everydayers and probably remember back that far, I said, looking at the schedule, it felt like to me this game against Iowa State was a scheduled loss for BYU, just by virtue of the fact that BYU would be coming off that rivalry game against Utah, and who knows how they would have fared at that point. And obviously how things played out last year in the aftermath of BYU winning that rivalry game and then summarily losing 2 straight games. So I looked at the schedule and I was fearful of BYU going to Ames in the circumstance. Well, that did not include, as it often does, the variables that play into all of this, mainly injuries and the like. Iowa State is a wounded animal right now, and it's not that any fault of their own. Injuries are inherent to the sport that we all love, speaking of college football. Guys want to play ball at the highest levels, but playing ball at the highest levels obviously includes the inherent risk of injury. And that's where Iowa State finds itself, because if you look at their player availability report, you got a number of guys that could or should be on the shelf for this weekend's game. So I say all of that to say this. BYU should go into this game feeling pretty confident about themselves, despite our friends at FanDuel and other sports books out there rating BYU as an underdog. Iowa State's a little bit in desperation. What I mentioned, the fact that they're a wounded animal, and that obviously plays into all of this. They want to bounce back. And if they were to beat BYU, they absolutely are right back in the thick of the Big 12 race, because they'd have a win over the leader in the clubhouse, and that would push them right back into the mix here, despite being 2-2 in the conference race. There are, I think, 11 teams within 2 games of the conference title race, and that in and of itself shows you how crazy this league is, and why BYU, if they're capable of doing it, needs to keep themselves above the fray. Kalani Sitake likes to talk a lot about controlling the controllable. Well, you know how you control the controllable in this circumstance? You go out to Ames, Iowa, you run the ball down their throat time and time again, then you play action off of it, you get enough points, let's say 24 plus, which is one of the pillars that Bronco Mendenhall has always espoused, and history suggests that if you keep a team under 24 and you score over 24, usually you're going to win more football games than you're going to lose. BYU needs to understand what's at stake here. The reputation of this football program, the reputation of the Big 12, and all of that is riding on their shoulders. I know it sounds crazy to say for a team, as I mentioned, that is an underdog according to our friends at FanDuel and the sports books and the like, but that's exactly where BYU has thrived in this circumstance. They know that they're being disrespected nationally. They know that there's a lot of naysayers out there who think that BYU is just scraping by. Well, our good friend Spencer McLaughlin, I joined him yesterday on Locked On College Football. He says, these are the know how to win or find a way to win Cougars, speaking of BYU. And that's exactly what they are. They're 18-2 in their past 20 games. They have proven time and time again over the past year plus to show an ability, uncanny as it is, just to find a way to win football games. And this game, yes, it's not going to be easy, because Iowa State, in many respects, I'm going to spoil a little bit of a surprise here, but Kelly Papinga says they look a lot like what BYU faced when it came to facing off against Stanford earlier this year. And what that means is they've got a decent quarterback. In fact, I think Rocco Becht is downright elite. I think he's a fantastic quarterback, but they use a lot of tight ends in their offense. And a lot of it's because of the injuries they've absorbed at wide receiver. And on the defense, they've lost a lot of the guys in the defensive secondary as well. So how do you go about defending this? Well, pull out your game plan from Stanford and make sure that those guys don't hurt you. Now, Abu Sama and Carson Hansen are very good running backs that are obviously going to play a role in this. Carson Hansen is probable on the player availability report. We'll see if he's available in this game. But BYU, I think, has a good feel, or at least should have a good feel for the style they're going up against, simply because they faced off against Stanford. I fully expect Iowa State to be able to execute what Stanford failed to execute against BYU, and do so at a much higher level. And that's going to mean BYU is going to have to be on their game, because Benjamin Brahmer, Gabe Burkle, I think it's also Tyler Moore. They're kind of the 3 tight ends, much like what Stanford threw, that are the focal point of the passing game here with the injuries they've absorbed at wide receiver. It is not going to be easy to go to Jack Trice Stadium, because I think Iowa State, among the, I guess you call them the hateful 8, the original 8, whatever you want to call it, the holdovers from the old Big 12, Jack Trice Stadium has one of the best home field advantages in that group. And I'm saying that a lot of them don't have home field advantages, because they do. But Iowa State fans, they're a unique fan base, because they are tried and true, thick and thin. They are as diehard as any Cougar fan, I feel like. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the environment it looks like when BYU heads to Jack Trice tomorrow afternoon. It's also a day game for BYU. They haven't played a day game in almost a year now, since last season. They've been playing a lot of night games, and we all know that the Vampire Cougs, Cardiac Cougs, whatever you want to term them, they've been very good under the lights. How do they thrive now with a mid-afternoon kick? That's also a new adjustment for BYU. I look forward to all of this, but I think the game plan is pretty simple for BYU. Bottle up the tight ends, make sure that guys like Rocco Becht, Abu Sama, Carson Hansen, the running game that Iowa State possesses does not get the traction that they are looking to establish. Meanwhile, you establish your ground game. Let a guy like LJ Martin have 25 to 30 carries because he's proven very durable so far this year. Control the controllables. Speaking of the time of possession, the pace of this game, let Bear Bachmeier cook with the QB run game and his play action ability, and get out of Ames with that victory and sit at 8-0 entering a bye week. I think that the worst loss BYU could take right now would be this one because they'd be sitting on that loss for 2 weeks, getting ready for Texas Tech on the road 2 weeks away. You don't want to enter a bye week on a downer note. And that's also got to be something that BYU's weighing in the back of their mind is, hey, we cannot let this slip right now because a lot of the Big 12 with Texas Tech falling last week, there's been a perception out there the Big 12 is, oh, hey, they're cute and all, but they can't compete at the highest levels. Well, BYU is now carrying that banner as the undefeated team, having a sterling record intact. And to let it fall by the wayside right now would only give more ammunition to those talking heads out there who want nothing more than to denigrate and downgrade the Big 12 and obviously BYU by extension. So it's an interesting dynamic at play here because BYU carries a lot of pressure going into this matchup, all the while being a betting underdog. It's kind of an oxymoron in so many different ways, but I'm looking forward to this matchup. I think BYU is very, very capable of winning this game. Is it going to be easy? No. And quite frankly, I think every game for the foreseeable future on this docket for BYU, even this game against Iowa State, they're going to be the type of games that I'm going into thinking, okay, it's kind of a one-possession game. And in those type of scenarios, 2, 3, 4 key plays, turnovers and the like, can really tilt these games and make it one way or the other in terms of who comes out with the victory. So BYU, keys to the game, take care of the darn football. You got to make sure that you are plus in the margin because when BYU's been plus in the margin, they're routinely going to win those football games. Yes, they have won a couple of times this year being minus in the margin, but that's not an area you want to live in because more often than not, that's going to catch up with you and cause you to lose games. I want to see LJ Martin run and run hard. I want to see some other running backs step up as well, whether it's Jovessa Damuni. My personal favorite is a guy like Preston Rex. I think Preston's been an absolute revelation this season. Despite all the injuries he's endured, he has proven to be a pretty versatile weapon, and I want to see more of that. Get the ball to Chase Roberts. Let Parker Kingston cook in both the run and pass game. And then obviously let Bear cook. And any of you have probably seen the shirt I'm wearing on YouTube today. My good friend David gave this to me last week when he saw me. And what that is, that's the Berserker 47, as he points out that in Nordic countries, the Viking age, well, Berserk, as you guys know, maybe you don't because I learned it myself, but Berserk comes from the Vikings. And what it means is Berserker. They thought that these guys who were the elite warriors, they were absolute just lunatics, probably a good term, that would go into battle. Well, they believe they became bears. So Berserker 47. There you go. So looking forward to seeing how Bear handles another road environment, but I don't worry about that kid anymore. He has proven to be a guy who doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low, and road environments, no matter how hostile or crazy they may get, he is proven to be very, very adaptable to playing in those circumstances. So we'll see how it all shakes out. And I'll just say it right now. I've got BYU winning this game 31-24. That's where I think it sits. And that's where I think BYU gets out with a victory. They'll do just enough and obviously hold Iowa State down enough as well and go to 8-0. And should the weekend pan out the way I expect it to, BYU will be safely inside the top 10 entering their bye week in the rankings come next Monday.
Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k or properties or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those all can save you money every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL.
After Lane Kiffin, what does the rest of the Florida Gators coaching list look like?
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators.
One of the names that is consistently tied to Lane Kiffin, and I do think has kind of emerged, I'll say, amongst the fan base as the number 2 name that we're talking about now, when, of course, we're looking past Marcus Freeman, Dan Lanning, Kurt Cignetti. We're looking past those guys. But I think the number 2 name tied to Florida right now is Eli Drinkwitz, which was on Anand Nanduri's list. But I think Eli Drinkwitz is a name that we're talking about a lot. And I will also say this. I've been very open before that I am not an Eli Drinkwitz fan. I've met him in person, and I thought he was a jerk. But I want my football team to win games. He's won, right? And I think looking at Eli Drinkwitz is a very important parallel to Billy Napier. You look at Eli Drinkwitz's first 3 years in Missouri, 5-5, 6-7, 6-7, right? Then he gave up offensive play calling duties. Okay. So 5-5, 6-7, 6-7, gave up offensive play calling duties. And then they went 11-2, 10-3, and they're currently 6-1. People keep bringing up the Missouri schedule. I don't understand it, because when you bring up Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin and that record, their strength of schedule is fairly similar. So I think that that's really odd to bring up the schedule all the time without bringing up Ole Miss's. It's just an odd thing to me. So I don't care to do that. And I will bring up a tweet from Hal Lewis, who's one of the Florida Gators boosters on Twitter. It's Hallie Gator, at Hallie Gator on Twitter. And he said, and I responded to him here, and he said Drinkwitz was 17-19 at Mizzou before he turned over the play calling to Kirby Moore, who, by the way, is Kellen Moore, head coach of the Saints, Kellen Moore's little brother, I think little, as offensive coordinator. They are 27-6 since then. So any team who hires Drinkwitz is just getting the 17-19 version, since Missouri was smart enough to keep Dan Moore as their head coach. Or Missouri would be smart enough to keep Kirby Moore as their head coach. I think I said Dan Moore. I don't know, offensive lineman. I don't think that's true. I think that any team that hires Eli Drinkwitz would not be getting 17-19 Eli Drinkwitz, because I think Eli Drinkwitz has recognized this team, my team, runs a lot better when I'm not the one calling plays. You wouldn't be getting Kirby Moore. So, yes, it could not work out. Eli Drinkwitz has pretty much nailed every coordinator hire he's had. OC, DC, both sides, has nailed pretty much every coordinator hire he's ever made. I do think that, I don't think we should assume we're getting the 27-6 Eli Drinkwitz. But I do think that you're acknowledging, hey, we're getting a coach that at least had the wherewithal to give up play calling duties and to find success that way. And I do think that matters. I think it means a lot for an offensive play calling head coach to give up play calling duties to a coordinator, especially Kirby Moore, who wasn't at Missouri before that. Like Kirby Moore came to Missouri and was given that play calling duty, but he wasn't doing that previously. He wasn't at Missouri previously. I think he was at Boise State, I want to say it was. So I think that when you look at that, it's like, all right, well, he brought in a guy to call the plays. Maybe you would look at someone like current Missouri quarterback coach Sean Gleason, who QB coach in the system, right? Knows the system. Because what Eli Drinkwitz did, the scheme didn't change dramatically or drastically, right? It was still relatively the same. I think Kirby Moore executed it better. But I think that's what a lot of head coaches should do if you're an offensive-minded head coach, right? And this was my take with Billy Napier as well. I think if you're an offensive-minded head coach and you say, hey, this is the system that we want to run, this is the scheme we want to run, this is going to be our identity, you get a coordinator that can run that system, run that scheme, because again, like we talked about with why you should hire an offensive-minded head coach over a defensive-minded head coach, is that as a defensive-minded head coach, you're going to have to, first off, shuffle your OC consistently if they're winning, right? If they're not winning, you're going to get fired. But as an offensive-minded head coach, like you are the offensive system, and it's a lot easier to replace a defensive coordinator and continue success than it is to replace an offensive coordinator and continue success, right? We see all the time teams with great offenses and bad defenses win games. Teams with great defenses and bad offenses don't win games. That doesn't work anymore. So I think that it's a lot more important to hire an offensive-minded head coach and to be able to have them kind of be the system. Like you want the head coach to be the system. And if they give up play calling duties, if they're not play calling, whatever you want to say, then I think as long as they have a coordinator that can execute that system, that matters more. Having the head coach be the system, recruit for that system. Because when you bring in a new OC, if you want to change the system completely, you might not be a fit. But if you're recruiting for this system and you bring in a guy to just be the play caller and learn this system and execute this system at a higher level, I think that's more important. And so that's how I look at it, at least. So Sean Gleason would be a seamless fit. Again, like you're not getting 27-6, or I don't think it's fair to say that you will or won't get 27-6 Drinkwitz. I don't think it's fair to say you will or won't get 17-19 Drinkwitz. I think that both of those are not the same. Like it would matter who he hires as his offensive coordinator, right? And he could hire anybody. He could hire Tony. Like he can hire people that we don't know about, right? Like he hired Kirby Moore, who wasn't at Missouri. He hired a guy to come play the offensive coordinator role, to come run the offense. But I do think that, like I've said so many times, with every coach is a risk, right? And every coach is a gamble. There's no sure thing. Even a guy like Lane Kiffin that we talk about, not a sure thing, not a gamble, not a guarantee. You could talk about who's the most likely or who's the safest bet, whatever that may be. And so I think that that's what you're kind of looking at. But either way, like I don't think that anybody's a safe bet. I'm not overlooking anybody for any reason, or any reason like, oh, they're not safe enough. I think everybody's got a risk. There's no guarantee. You're taking a swing on everybody. Everybody's got different resources now, different situations. Things change. You take the safest bet, that's Lane. But if that one doesn't work out, there's more names like Eli Drinkwitz, which I do think is a riskier bet than Lane. I think is a safer bet than a lot of names that we will talk about throughout these next few weeks. But I do think that also, like there's levels to all of these decisions.